an appeal can happen. Let me explain the appeal to you real quick because I think that's important as well. So just the judge said yesterday, I want y'all to understand this. The judge said it yesterday. I'm afraid to go off and find these and pull it up and be looking at it and then they do the verdict. So the judge said yesterday that Maxine Waters' comments has given the defense plenty of material for an appeal. That she pretty much almost threw the case. Maxine Waters threw the case because as a sitting public official, she came out and threatened and coerced a decision by saying there needs to be more violence if the outcome is not what she wanted to be. The judge said this. The presiding judge said that Maxine Waters' comments has given the defense a lot on appeal and that she almost threw the case. But however, he denied the motion to a mistrial. He denied it. But on appeal, they got a lot of fodder. They're going to appeal. If he get guilty, they're going to appeal this and they're going to win. The mayor of the city came out and pretty much demanded that Chauvin is guilty no matter what. Maxine Waters, other politicians in Congress, the city paid $27 million to the Floyd's family before the trial. The world can see that they paid the family out. Are you begging for a mistrial? You're begging. You're saying, please, let's throw this case. Let's throw the case. And then you have other politicians like Nancy Pelosi. You have other politicians like Nancy Pelosi that said that Maxine Waters did nothing wrong. She did nothing wrong. You're finna cause them to throw a trial. And this is what I want to happen. I want the trial to be, I would rather, now because I don't want to give people satisfaction of unlawfully treating somebody, but I almost want him to be guilty and to win on appeal and for them to cite that Maxine Waters was the cause of winning on an appeal. And let's see how people treat Maxine Waters.
And all those others from Minneapolis police turned on Derek Chauvin and his actions that day. Richard Zimmerman, the longtime homicide detective, and then getting into the medical evidence, the cause of death, complex. But did Martin Tobin really put on quite a display of knowledge and walking this jury through what his thoughts were and conclusions on the police restraint and the lack of oxygen George Floyd was taking in as pinned to the ground. George Floyd trying to literally breathe with his knuckles and the like. And then, of course, the defense doing its best to bring out some other thoughts and processes, questioning. And it's good to have a system that challenges one another, where a jury ends up being the unbiased arbiter of a situation. And that's what we're watching unfold here. The defense had its chance to explain what was going on. Derek Chauvin's training, what an objectively reasonable officer would do in the totality of the situation. So it was a beautiful system that played out before us over the last month plus. You guys know I love being at the courthouse for these very reasons. This is people's lives that are at stake here. Derek Chauvin's future, the Floyd family here with so much at stake with what we're about to hear. I do want to just turn, just because I kind of have a bird's eye view from where Courtney and some of our other crews are down below at the south side of the Hennepin County Government Center. Courtney mentioned media mostly there, but of course demonstrators are arriving. They want to be in close proximity as this verdict is read. And I just want to follow up on one of her points about law enforcement closing down some additional streets. They had some extra fencing, right? We all know the whole building was fortified, but then they had fencing posts at different spots where they could close off blocks to kind of give more of a shield to downtown City Hall, the Hennepin County Government Center. So in Courtney's last report, it sounded like they must have closed down one of those extra barricades there. But it's a really interesting vantage from being up here, because as I do see people flocking to the government center behind me to be here for this historic and global impactful moment, there also is sort of a mass exodus that's happening. Of course, where I sit or stand heading in this direction would be the interstates getting on 35W. And if you head the other way towards 394, there is this sort of exodus out of downtown. And you were with me earlier when I was speaking to criminal defense attorney Ryan Pasiga, who offices downtown. His employees all had go bags from their office up on the 27th floor of a nearby tower for this very moment. They grabbed their stuff and left. We know they cleared out government buildings, the federal courthouse on the other side of the Hennepin County Government Center. They cleared out everybody. They are very concerned about what comes next, guys, after this verdict is read. The preparation has been done. Is everybody ready? We will see.
You are absolutely right, Paul. Two resounding questions as of yesterday. What will this jury come back with, and what will happen after the verdict is read? Those are the things that we're anxiously awaiting for. As you can imagine, we do have Skyfox 9 up there in the top left of your screen, as you can see. And Paul noted that the crowd of people is beginning to grow outside the Hennepin County Government Center. There's 4 boxes there, 38th in Chicago in the lower left. And of course, then a ground view of outside the courthouse there in the plaza. And then the courthouse, the courtroom inside that courthouse right there. And that is the one we'll focus on as this jury comes back with its verdict. We'll go full on that. We'll hear every second of it when it happens, and we're told it should happen before 4 o'clock.
Yeah, waiting for that in the next 20 minutes or so. Also just want to make note that this is a trial that was televised for the world to see, to understand the process, to hear the testimony day after day from jury selection until closing arguments. And so today we will see the verdict being read live as well, something that it's a glimpse into the courtroom that we don't often get here.
You're right, Kelsey. I mean, it really is hard to overstate the magnitude of this moment as we and the nation and the world wait for this verdict. We want to bring in our legal analyst, Lee Hutton. Lee, along those lines, I mean, a big question for you here. What's at stake?
Well, I'll break it down into 2 comments. The first comment is Minnesota is going to show the world their reflection of leadership. Attitude reflects leadership. So if the verdict is acquittal, we're going to be the leaders in that decision. If it reflects conviction, we'll be the leaders the same. And it's ironic that both sides, the state and the defense, talked about heart. And I looked at the definition of humanity, and the quality or state of being human joined together by their common humanity. And hopefully that the decision, no matter what it is, will do just that. And that's how big it is, because that humanity is going to spread throughout the world based on what we do here. This is, to say it's big is a certainly understatement. I would say this will reflect who we are in our souls. This decision will reflect how the rest of the world is in theirs.
And in closing arguments, the state reminding the public that the Minneapolis Police Department's motto is to protect with courage, serve with compassion. Can you walk us through, Lee, what will happen as this verdict is read, what will happen in the courtroom today, which will be relatively quiet because of the COVID restrictions, but then also when will we have sentencing and what can we expect with that?
So sentencing is going to be off for quite some months. I think the other legal expert mentioned, he's absolutely right, that there's a lot of procedures with regard to evaluations, procedures. There's going to be some motions by the state for upward departure of the sentencing guidelines. There's going to be motions by the defense for a downward departure of those guidelines. So we're not going to learn of a sentence anytime soon here. With all that being said, the mood in the courtroom is going to be controlled by the judge. He understands that this verdict means a lot to a lot of different people and means differently to a lot of different people. And so number one, he's going to make sure that the jury gets the utmost respect, and they will start out by standing for the jury, and that when the verdict is read, everyone is going to have to remain calm. There's not going to be any outbursts. first, and then based on that decision, you'll see Derek Chauvin either being escorted to the back outside the courtroom where he'll await his fate. If it's conviction, he will be charged and he'll go to wherever he's going to be held. If it's an acquittal, I'm pretty sure that they will let people leave the courtroom in an orderly fashion. So in anticipation of people's outburst.
Lee, there will be a lot of emotion when this verdict is read. And if he is convicted on 1, 2, or 3 of these charges, help us understand there is an appeal process that would likely take place, and help us understand between those charges what may end up happening down the road.
I think we all can anticipate, based on defendants' motions, that there's going to be an appeal if there's a conviction. We'll have to wait and see what terms or what are the arguments for appeal. We have at least some indication that possible the jury sequestration or lack thereof basically tainted the jury. One other potential appeal is that comments from local leaders disturbed how the jury was thinking. And there may be many more. I mean, we've even had an allegation of prosecutorial misconduct based on statements in the closing arguments, all of which were denied by the judge. With that being said, the defense has a right to put those arguments before the Court of Appeals that will judge. Now, again, that appeal process will take some time. Typically, you have 90 days after a certain timeline to give your notice, and then the Court of Appeals will give you the timing of the date so you can prepare your full arguments. And so all that needs to take place and happen. I don't think any appeal or notice of appeal will take place until after sentencing, but there are occasions where you can make the appeal much quicker.
Lee, your legal mind, your experience in the courtroom, we appreciate your analysis so much in talking with you over the past couple of weeks. We'll come back to you in just a little bit, but we also want to see what's happening outside right now, too.
Yeah, we want to go to 38th in Chicago, that very iconic location now here in the Twin Cities where George Floyd died on May 25th, sort of the focal point of where this all began. Our Babs Santos is there with us today. Babs, you mentioned earlier the mood at 38th in Chicago, somewhat subdued, sort of anticipatory, waiting to see what happens.
Yeah, Randy, the crowd behind me has circled up and they're beginning to pray here at 38th in Chicago in anticipation of this verdict being read. They're doing it right here on the ground next to the spot where George Floyd's body lay unconscious for some minutes, as we all saw in that video. I'm going to step to the side. I'm trying to speak in a low voice because this, for these people, is a sacred place. And now that this verdict has been announced and is on the way, today is a sacred day. Minute by minute, we're seeing more and more people starting to show up. They've been chanting, and excitement for this verdict is just growing. But at the same time, I've got to say, they are also pretty nervous. They just don't know what to expect.
I can imagine that. We're seeing a similar situation, Babs, at outside of the Hennepin County Government Center in the plaza there. And we're seeing also the Skyfox 9 shot there. And as we've said in the last half hour or so, that is a much larger and growing crowd by the minute. Babs, you said there's a prayer vigil going on right there. Do you get a sense that the crowd that is gathered there is really there just to hear the verdict in the George Floyd case against Derek Chauvin? Or is there more being anticipated there, being planned there after this verdict comes down?
Well, they've said that no matter what happens with this verdict, this is always going to be a special place for them. I think they wanted to come here to come back to the place where this all started. And when they first circled up, they were praying. Now they've just started to speak and really get their messages across that they want to see changes in the system and changes in policing, no matter what this jury decides here.
All right, Babs Santos at 38th in Chicago, one of the very important focal points in the Twin Cities. As we wait for this verdict, again, we're told that verdict will likely come down. The jury's decision likely come down before 4 o'clock. We were given notice shortly after 2 o'clock that this was going to happen today, some 10 hours into deliberation for yesterday. approximately 6 today. And if it comes down around 4 o'clock, that's a 24-hour window between the closing arguments and the jury taking this under consideration. Again, there are 3 charges: second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. That jury can find Derek Chauvin not guilty on all 3 charges, or they can break it down and find him guilty on any one or all of those charges. That's something to watch for when they do finally read the verdict and their decision in this case as it comes up.
And the world is watching right now. News headlines around the world talking about this verdict. New Zealand, Australia, around the world and across the country. There's a crowd gathering right now where George Floyd was born in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And as you'll remember, last summer, there were marches around the world in Germany, Australia, all over Europe about George Floyd and this moment that happened on May 25th when he lost his life. So there are lots of eyeballs on this verdict and where we go from here as a community and as a nation. And there is a lot of anxiety in those crowds right now. A lot of people wondering what the verdict is going to be and what that will mean for this city, for the state, and for this country.
We want to go now live to our Mitty Hicks, who is also at 38th in Chicago in a little bit of a different location in front of the Cup Foods. Mitty, what's the tone like where you are?
Yeah, well, just a minute ago, people were chanting Black Lives, They Matter here. And you do feel this sense of urgency, this sense of anxiety as people here wait for that verdict. When we first came down here, there were about 30, 40 people, and it looks like there could be about 100 people here. Here, I'll just get out of the way. You know, Babs mentioned this earlier. This is a sacred place for a lot of people. You have activists coming down, really talking to the crowd about, listen, whatever happens with this verdict, it doesn't stop here. That's one thing we've been hearing over and over again. To the right of me, you see more signs. You see signs for Dante Wright. You see pictures of Philando Castile. You just kind of see people waiting, coming together, and really just trying to be each other's support as they wait for this verdict. One of the activists in the middle, there's a little crowd that circled together by a mural of George Floyd. And one of the activists was really saying, we have to do more work. No matter what happens with this verdict, we have to go to certain communities, figure out how to fund other communities. So again, that we don't see these type of trials again, because her point was that, a lot of times in certain communities, they just don't have a lot of resources. So that's one of the things she was focusing on, is getting more resources in the community, even after this verdict. So again, it's very anxious here. A lot of waiting going on, a lot of chanting. They are starting up again with saying Black Lives, They Matter here. So that's what we're seeing a little bit here on the scene, Kelsey and Randy.
All right, Mitty, thank you so much. Paul Bloom standing by the Hennepin County Government Center up in the nest there above all of this, outside that area where the verdict will come down. He joins us now once again. Paul, your standpoint, your viewpoint, good one, because you can see, as you said before, people leaving the city, trying to get out before this verdict comes down, and what may happen after that, what may not happen after that. We want to make sure that we stay focused on that as well. But again, you're also seeing the droves of people that are moving into the city outside the government center.
Yeah, Randy, it's kind of a tale of two views from here. On one side, the growing crowd on the South Lawn, and then, as I mentioned, the traffic heading out towards the ramps, leaving downtown. And as you see on that screen, as we have the multi-box format for you, I keep looking at that seal of Minnesota in the courtroom. And obviously, I've been in the media center throughout this case. And we know that the court TV cameras, when nobody's in the courtroom or they're setting up, they zero in. The camera can only show that seal of Minnesota. And then once Judge Cahill takes his position on the bench, then they are allowed to pull out. And that is when we know we are within moments of this verdict being read. So I'm continuing to just kind of eyeball that seal, because once that camera starts pulling out of that shot, we will know that the verdict is upon us. And as I stand here and reflect a little bit on kind of just the last couple hours now, The jury reaching a verdict here within 10 hours of deliberations. I mentioned off the top when I first started looking back at the Muhammad Noor police shooting, where Muhammad Noor was convicted on 2 counts, acquitted on the third, the highest charge. He was convicted on third-degree murder and manslaughter charges. That jury deliberated between 10 and 11 hours. So right in that same window of time that we're talking about here, 10 hours of jury deliberations, a verdict reached. I know we've been talking to our legal analysts about what it means, seemingly favoring the state and at least perhaps convictions on multiple counts. But we will see. Now just minutes away, waiting. They said by 4 o'clock, so we're now within about 6 minutes of that point. And again, demonstrators, media, that South Lawn filling up. From where I am, obviously we know security is intense. The governor has called in state troopers from other states, Nebraska, Ohio. I would just sort of comment. I did just see a couple of Anoka County sheriff deputy squads coming downtown here a minute ago, heading towards this crowd at the government center. Obviously, we know Operation Safety Net, multi-jurisdictional. The National Guard is here. We talked about the clearing out of downtown, buildings evacuated. A law firm, Ryan Pasiga, with us earlier, telling us he had his teams with go bags. Minneapolis Public Schools, looking forward these next few days, had already announced they were going to distance learning because of the potential of disruptions around the city. It's just really hard to believe since the Memorial Day death, the tragedy that unfolded at 38th and Chicago, not even a full year later, here we are, a jury with a verdict, unanimous verdicts up and down. We don't know what they are. 3 counts, murder 2, murder 3, second-degree manslaughter, and this backdrop that it comes upon with what happened in Brooklyn Center with Dante Wright recently, the unrest that unfolded there, the move to try to sequester the jury in the days or in the hours that basically followed that, and Judge Cahill's decision not to. Of course, this jury was sequestered overnight, so they deliberated 4 hours yesterday. They stayed together in an area hotel. Then they got back at it at 8 a.m. this morning, 12 hours in between 8 a.m. And by, I didn't mark it on my clock, but I think around 2:25, official word had come down that the jury had reached unanimous verdicts and was ready to read these decisions in court. Of course, they will come in, 12 of them. We have what has been described as a fairly diverse jury for Hennepin County, 4 members self-describing Black, 2 multi-race, 6 white jurors making up this panel of 12. And we await what they have to say. They certainly know the world is watching. It will be interesting, as Kelsey mentioned a little bit ago, just to see if any of them want to talk afterwards or if this is something they will just stay silent on and sort of do this anonymously as they cast their verdict today after listening to weeks of evidence, 45 witnesses, testimony from all sides, and now the world awaits what those 12 people, the conclusions they reached during their sequestered deliberations over the last day and a half.
And quickly, Paul, you had the chance to be a pool reporter in the courtroom. What did you witness with the jury? I know I read a lot of notes that said they were very attentive most of the time, and they got right to work yesterday.
They did get right to work. I was curious to kind of see what they felt about Eric Nelson's lengthy closing arguments yesterday. And, I talked to the pool reporter who was inside there. She was describing that there was some tune out, some distraction. But she said nothing over the top, right? We were sitting in the media center thinking, oh, God, this is, I don't mean to disrespect Eric Nelson. He had a hell of a job to defend his client, and he did it wonderfully. But it just went on and on. I didn't know how the jury might react in that moment, but she said nothing over the top. They did seem focused, a lot of note taking. The one thing I will say about my day was sort of mid-trial. It was the Friday that went half a day. There was a Minneapolis police sergeant. And then in the second witness was the longtime homicide detective, Lieutenant Richard Zimmerman. And he's old school police and is just kind of engaging as a witness. And when he was talking about how the move of a knee to the back of George Floyd's neck was totally uncalled for, and nowhere in his 3 decades of training had he ever been trained to do anything like that. You saw at that point, all 14 jurors, of course, 2 have been sent home as alternates, but at that point, everybody went right to their notebook and appeared really engaged, really interested. I thought that was a point worth noting. And then the other thing was just how quickly I was mid-trial, and already I had noticed, friendships had sprung up during breaks, jurors turning to one another in their seating area and talking. And of course, you got to remember, and I know we've talked about this courtroom is just so different. The layout, the feel of mid-COVID, the plexiglass, the jurors are spread further apart. Usually they're kind of bunched in a little tighter. It's difficult to make eye contact with the defendant, how they have him situated, and the way the courtroom lays out. So it's a different dynamic. Just keep that in mind as you watch. I don't know the exact layout of the 3 cameras, Court TV, who's providing the cameras inside the courtroom that we do broadcast live. They have some fixed camera positions that Judge Cahill has agreed to as part of this process of televising, of making this most public of trials public. And I do want to say the one other thing about the camera angle, this is the one time where the camera will be allowed to zoom in on the defendant. Otherwise, the rules from Cahill was to stay wide, no tight shots. But today, look for that camera to zoom in on the defendant's reaction when these verdicts are read.
All right, Paul, thank you so much. We appreciate that. I want to remind our viewers it's 4 o'clock now. This is the time in which we were told the verdict would come in from this jury. We're going to show you very live images from all around the Twin Cities, but primarily you'll see that symbol there, that iconic seal there, that is inside the courtroom. We'll make sure you understand that. And then we have Skyfox 9 up in the air as well. We have a camera at 38th in Chicago, and of course we have a ground camera there outside the Hennepin County Courthouse there on the plaza scene. And we are watching what happens very closely once that verdict is read. Again, the charges against Derek Chauvin, this jury considers all of them or none of them. They can come back with a partial verdict in terms of the charges, second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. They could deem him guilty on all charges or innocent on all charges, not guilty. And those are what we're watching for right now, the combination. We do know that there's a unanimous verdict in this because they came back with that, and the court has on record with the verdict. So we know at least that is what's happening here in the next few minutes.
And Randy, policing, a verdict aside, this really has the potential to change policing in the country. And I wanted to bring in Mike Bryant one more time and lean on him in what could be the last few moments we have here before the verdict is read. Mike, I think back to Dr. Martin Tobin specifically and his testimony. Do you think that, verdict aside, that the testimony given during this trial could have the potential to change the way that police, the use of force specifically?
Potentially. It's interesting because you had a number of police officers that testified this isn't the way we do it anyway. So the question is what was the training issue early that some say it isn't how we do it, and then we never heard from the defendant, which is his right under the Constitution, but he did it this way, and there's other examples of it being done. I think they brought up some examples when there's been testimony contrary by one of the experts. But it's another thing to look at. And with what continues to happen across the country, those are all things that need to be looked at. As far as training goes, we need to make sure that training's done properly, and that we have people who have the abilities to do what they're doing it.
Mike, I want to ask you about this jury, and try and put yourself as our legal analyst in the eyes of this jury. They had those 3 charges, and as I mentioned just a short time ago, they have to consider all 3 when they make their decision on something like this. You watched this trial unfold. You watched the key points of this trial. You saw the defense's objective and their game plan, as well as the state's objectives and game plan. If you're a jury sitting there yesterday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, what was the first thing that sort of is the bellwether moment in that trial for a juror?
Well, there were a couple things that I think you could point to. As a group, We know that they were a group that tended to not get into the news or not follow the news on what was happening in this case anyway, because they wouldn't be on the jury if they were deep into it. Second is, we know when they were brought back on that Monday, and a group of them came back and they said they heard something and they turned it off right away. So as a group, they stayed away from everything, or as much as they could on this case. And then suddenly, boom, they got weeks of the videos over and over again, and the experts over and over again, and people talking over again. So they got a lot of, for people that originally turned away from it, a lot of information along those lines. For me, big points that came up in the trial were when we saw George Floyd inside Cup Foods. We got to see him alive. You know, people you don't normally experience that. Did you get a chance to see somebody who the case is involving a dead person, but you get to see a bunch about him when he's alive that just is minutes before he dies. The point when they heard the defendant talk to Mr. Williams on that tape, you know, that was an opportunity for them to hear him at the scene right after it's happened and make some determinations on what that felt. I wonder what effect it had on.
All right, I want to take you now inside the courtroom. As you can see there, Judge Peter Cahill has taken his seat at the bench. We can assume the jury is in as well, since our court camera is now focused on the judge. It's moments away now from that verdict being read. Let's just stop and listen to see what the judge has to say.
All rise for the jury. All right, please be seated. Members of the jury, I understand you have a verdict. Members of the jury, I will now read the verdicts as they will appear in the permanent records of the 4th Judicial District. State of Minnesota, County of Hennepin, District Court, 4th Judicial District. State of Minnesota Plaintiff versus Derek Michael Chauvin, Defendant. Verdict, Count 1, Court File Number 27, CR 6. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to count 1, unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April, 2021 at 1:44 p.m. Signed, juror foreperson, juror number 19. Same caption, verdict count 2. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to count 2, third-degree murder, perpetrating an eminently dangerous act, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April, 2021 at 1:45 p.m. Signed by jury foreperson, juror number 19. Same caption, verdict count 3. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to count 3, second-degree manslaughter, culpable negligence, creating an unreasonable risk, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April, 2021 at 1:45 p.m. Jury foreperson 019. Members of the jury, I'm now going to ask you individually if these are your true and correct verdicts. Please respond yes or no. Juror number 2, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 9, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 19, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 27, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 44, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 52, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 55, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 79, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 85, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 89, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 91, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 92, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Are these your verdicts? So say you one, so say you all.
Yes.
Members of the jury, I find that the verdicts as read reflect the will of the jury and will be filed accordingly. I have to thank you on behalf of the people of the state of Minnesota for not only jury service, but heavy duty jury service. What I'm going to ask you to do now is to follow the deputy back into your usual room, and I will join you in a few minutes to answer questions and to advise you further. So all rise for the jury. All right, be seated. With the guilty verdicts returned, we're going to have Blakely, you may file a written argument as to Blakely factors within 1 week. The court will issue findings on the Blakely factors, the factual findings, 1 week after that. We'll order a PSI immediately returnable in 4 weeks. And we will also have a briefing on, after you get the PSI, 6 weeks from now, and then 8 weeks from now, we will have sentencing. We'll get you the exact dates in a scheduling order. Is there a motion on behalf of the state?
Your Honor, the state would move to have the court revoke the defendant's bail and remand him into custody pending sentencing.
Bail is revoked, bond is discharged, and the defendant is remanded to the custody of the Hennepin County Sheriff. Anything further?
All
right. Thank you. We're adjourned.
So, counsel, Gates, I can send you.
And with that, Derek Chauvin remanded to the custody of the Hennepin County Sheriff, guilty on all 3 counts: second-degree murder, guilty; third-degree murder, guilty; second-degree manslaughter, also guilty. We showed you it live. It came down about 4:07. We also are showing you now what happened when those guilty verdicts were read. The crowds at the Hennepin County Government Center, at 38th in Chicago, all elated with those verdicts. As you can imagine, this is the anticipation of all of this has been on the minds of Minnesotans, the nation, and the world. And this is something that is the culmination of what occurred with George Floyd on May 25th, there at 38th in Chicago, when Officer Chauvin, then Officer Chauvin, knelt on George Floyd's neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. The rest, as you've seen in the last couple weeks, is history, with the testimony both from the state and from the defense, trying to prove the state that this was a willful act, that he in fact did commit murder, and then his defense team trying to prove that George Floyd's death was the result of George Floyd's health contributed by drugs in his system. This jury, a 14-member jury, decided guilty on all charges.
This is a historic moment. You saw the crowd's reaction there in the boxes as this verdict was read. We have Lee Hutton on standby with his reaction as well.
Lee, you and I have been covering this from the beginning. I need to gauge your reaction.
I hate to say it, I'm surprised, but this is the right verdict. And the reason why I'm surprised, Minnesota, this is the first time in history where we've seen a situation with excessive force be recognized as not okay. This goes a long way for individuals, especially people of color, that their voices are heard, that they are conscious in the eyes of the law, and that factors of carbon monoxide and enlarged heart are not important enough to disregard the actions of an individual with just kind of a small heart, as Jerry Blackwell put it. I'm kind of numb. I'm kind of in shock. Everybody knows I'm a Southerner coming up from Minnesota, very similar to George Floyd, to get away from what we believe as still the gallant South. and to come to Minnesota and to have some of those same issues follow us is hard to digest. But with this verdict, I think it's going to set the tone that people are going to act differently and act better. So we can only wish that we learn from Derek Chauvin's consequences in the verdict, where people are saying enough is enough.
Lee, and with those sentencing guidelines, what can we expect to see as far as a prison sentence when they do sentence him in about 8 weeks? And at that sentencing hearing, you do get to hear a victim impact statement and perhaps a statement from Mr. Chauvin as well.
That's right, and there's still a lot to accomplish in this time period. You heard the judge referred to a PSI. That's where somebody will come to Derek Chauvin and ask him a couple of questions to determine whether or not there's any remorse, to determine his kind of state of mind, and that will be in a report that both parties will get to see. And based on that report, the individual taking that PSI assessment will give at least an idea on whether or not either certain penalties should be enhanced or not. So it'll be interesting to see what that PSI report says. But with this, we still have a long way to go. The judge will be the person who decides the sentencing, and we'll see motions by the state for an upward departure, meaning they're asking for the high end of the box, and we'll anticipate the defense asking for a downward departure, basically something lower. In the box.
Lee, I don't want to interrupt you. We just want to take a moment here and take you out into the streets of Minneapolis and just listen to some of the sounds and the sights that we're seeing right now.
We want to say Dante right, we want to say George Floyd. This sounds good. Say his name! Dante right! 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 We're going to take, again, like I said, we're going to take justice hostage. Right? We put pressure on their ass to charge him. We didn't put pressure like as a community, being down here, boots on the ground, putting pressure on our government. He would probably got found not guilty. So we're not doing it yet. The battle's not over. All right, we still got it. More bodies, we still fight for it. It's a lot of stolen lives that the state of Minnesota has taken from us. So we're gonna head to that Brooklyn Center police station. Make sure y'all ask every single day. So don't think that.
Grab the stick out of my backpack and you can start grabbing some sound.
Did you hear them? They wanted you to.
So here at this now infamous
All right, you're looking at some live pictures from across the city. Up in the top left, that is an aerial picture of the government center. And then the box on the top right, 38th in Chicago, and bottom left, 38th in Chicago. And then I believe on the bottom right, outside the government center as well. The crowd's reacting to this verdict that came down at 4:05. And in just a few short moments, that verdict was read. Guilty on all three counts: second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. This jury coming to that decision in 10 hours of deliberation. And we talked to the crowd going into this, many of them feeling a lot of anxiety, nervous about what the outcome would be. And then we were able to watch, and while it was silent, while we were listening to the judge in the courtroom, you could see the cheers and the response from the crowd. All right, we want to bring Paul Bloom in, who has covered every minute of this trial. And so, Paul, tell us just what you're seeing right now from your vantage point.
Well, a couple of things to bring you up to speed on, Kelsey. First, my vantage point. I know I'm kind of the courtroom reporter, but I do want to set the stage just from where I am, 5 floors up above the ground below. A large scene, as you guys are showing on the ground, whether it's maybe still be 38th in Chicago, but a large demonstration, hooting and hollering as soon as those first verdicts were read. I have noticed some of the group has splintered off and is now blocking traffic along 3rd Avenue below. So they have blocked what is an open avenue, in essence, alongside the government center and City Hall. A lot of horn honking, a lot of hooting, a lot of hollering. Obviously, a lot of celebrating here. These people fought long and hard for months to get justice in this case. They obviously feel that is what they were rewarded with this afternoon, just in the last few minutes. But I also want to bring you into the courtroom, in that we do have our first pool notes from our courtroom reporter today. Philonise Floyd was in the family seat. I know we're going to hear from the Floyds shortly. Their attorney does have the Floyd family ready to go in a news conference shortly, so we'll hear directly from them. But Philonise Floyd sitting with his elbows on his armrest and hands clasped in front, looking downward, not clear if he's praying, weary, or what. Cahill reads the last verdict. Chauvin gives no resistance as a deputy handcuffs him and escorts him to a side room. Philonise Floyd hugs Jerry Blackwell, Keith Ellison, and the other prosecutor. Ellison and Blackwell heartily shake hands. It did appear Philonise perhaps saying some prayers just before this verdict was read. So I thought that was some interesting color from inside the courtroom. Again, because of the way cameras were restricted, the defendant did have his mask on, so we didn't necessarily get a clear indication of his reaction. But guilty verdicts, all three counts. Judge Cahill, upon the state, did request that Derek Chauvin's bail be revoked. Judge Cahill did agree to that. You saw Derek Chauvin then handcuffed, led away by a Hennepin County deputy. Again, just a few minutes in that courtroom, but history made right there on the 18th floor in the government center behind me.
All right, Paul Bloom, thank you very much up there in the government center, nest as we've called it for the last 3 weeks. Courtney Godfrey is down on the plaza there outside the government center, also with reaction from this crowd. Elation seemed to be the one word we could attribute to almost everyone that was there, Courtney.
Yeah, Randy, pure joy out here. This is a celebratory crowd. They are celebrating guilty on all three counts. This is good news for this crowd. This is what they've been fighting for the last year almost. Now, I will say that they have been chanting George Floyd's name, but they also have been chanting for Daunte Wright. They say that now that Derek Chauvin is guilty, they now are hoping for guilty charges for Kim Potter. Now, they are also talking about those three other officers. They want those three other officers to be guilty as well. But in general, Randy, down here, a celebratory tone. They are thrilled over this verdict, and it's just a jovial tone. I mean, Brian, pan over for them so that they can see. I mean, there are cars blocking the streets, there are people standing around, media everywhere, and it's just, it's very celebratory, Randy.
All right, Courtney Godfrey outside the Hennepin County Government Center on the plaza area there with literally thousands of people that have gathered at this hour now, post-verdict in the Derek Chauvin murder trial.
All right, up on the top right corner of your screen, you see our reporter, Babs Santos. He is at 38th in Chicago. Babs, tell us about the mood there now that the verdict has come back guilty on all three charges.
It's really just like a party here. At first, when we were waiting for the verdict, it got really quiet. Everyone was gathered around, listening to their phones or whatever they could get around to find out what was happening in the courtroom. As soon as the verdict came in, everybody just erupted in cheers and applause, started yelling, shouting, crying, lots of people hugging. We've seen cars coming by, laying on their horns. So just a lot of excitement here after the verdict read.
You know, Babs, you had interviewed Charles McMillan. He was the 61-year-old man who stopped and tried to talk to George Floyd as he was being taken into custody. And can you describe, since you had a chance to talk to him in person, the emotional toll that it's taken on him to be a witness in this case and also to wait for a verdict?
It's been really emotional. Actually, just before the verdict was read, I was on the phone with his son. He is still in Minnesota, and they were watching it. I talked with him. He said that, you know, a verdict coming back so quickly was a sign that it could be good news for them. At the same time, they didn't know what to expect. So I know they were both at home watching closely to see what would happen with the verdict. And I'm sure wherever they are now, they're happy. We're hoping to talk with them later this afternoon and see how he's doing.
Babs, as you take in all this out there, and I know there's a lot, and there are people all around you right now, you mentioned elation as one of the feelings that is prevalent there at George Floyd Square, which it's known by many as now 38th in Chicago. The sense for what happens next there at that site is what?
Well, I've heard people saying that this isn't enough. I heard the name Dante Wright, obviously the unarmed 20-year-old black man who was recently shot and killed in Brooklyn Center. So they're saying this is not enough, but this is a starting point for them, and they are happy with that.
Babs, if you could describe for some of our viewers, there may be people who want to come to that area of 38th and Chicago tonight. Over the past several months, we have described that as sort of a no-go zone.
This is pretty, I don't know if you can see this, but they're literally throwing money in the air. They are just ecstatic here. Can you see this?
Yes.
Yeah, we see it, Babs.
They're throwing money everywhere. That really sums up how people are feeling. Many people couldn't be happier. Other people still sad that it came to this in the first place, but.
All right. Babs, we expect to hear from the George Floyd family and Attorney Benjamin Crump here in a little bit as well, and we'll be sure to carry that as they get ready to address the public. And Polonus in court today, his brother as well. But again, you're looking at the crowds that have gathered. We expect them to continue to build as the night goes on. Very celebratory situation, though, going on right now.
And Babs, I was starting to ask you, if folks are wanting to go down there, if they haven't been to this area before, what kind of access will they have? Are law enforcement encouraging them to not come down?
Come to me. Hey.
There's
Babs, let's
Babs,
take you again. You have somebody there?
This is becoming an emotional situation. He's saying, take all the money and put it here.
No, right here. That money goes to the people who've been here since day one. It goes into the community. Don't you, get that money over here. If you're a part of the community, pick that money up, bring it over here.
They're picking it up and doing, as he says, really throwing the money right where George Floyd's body lay. The money's everywhere, hitting me in the face.
I think the concept there is to reward the community who has been there behind that site since May 25th. There's been a lot of discussion about what George Floyd Square or 38th in Chicago should become in the future, how it should serve that community, how it should serve the entire community of Minnesota. And my presumption is, based on what I can hear there, is he wants that money, whatever it is, to be there in that community, to stay in that community for whatever purpose the future holds for 38th and Chicago, its people, and that particular site.
All right, Mitty Hicks is also at 38th in Chicago. And I know, Mitty, you have been with people who burst into tears when this verdict was read.
Right. Yeah, that's right. There were a lot of tears here. And one of the lead organizers, we have Marcia here with us. Can you just really tell us your reaction when you heard that verdict?
I was really thrilled for the family of George Floyd, who, like the rest of the world, saw the video of their loved one being killed by the Minneapolis police. And so I'm gratified that they could get a measure of justice. As we stand here in solidarity, looking for justice from the city of Minneapolis and the state of Minnesota for 38th and Chicago, we can only hope that they continue to strive toward reaching number 24, which is the conviction of all 4 officers who were there on that tape and contributed to the death of George Floyd. And until then, no justice, no street.
A lot of you are saying here today, that it's so much bigger than this verdict. What is next for you all? What do you all want to see happen next, even after, the other 3 go to trial?
What we want to see is the city become a beacon to the entire country of what it looks like when they cooperate with the citizens in order to ideate a world beyond traditional policing, where we are not terrorized on our own streets, where we are afforded opportunity and not get overpromised and underdelivered and overpoliced and overcriminalized, where we get a measure of liberty and freedom and justice that other people in the state are afforded. We want justice. And if you read the 24 demands of Justice Resolution 001 at bit.ly/George Floyd Square-A, you'll see at least 24 ways that we give the city and the county and the state and the country of what justice looked like and how we can get to it.
And my last question, what does this verdict today signify for the rest of the country as all eyes are looking at Minneapolis, you think?
I think it's a victory for, I don't know, facts. We all saw what happened. It was really indisputable, though we took many days to come to that conclusion. So hopefully, as more people use technology, when they are interacting with people who are agents of the state, then maybe the rest of the country will believe us when we say that we are in fact treated unfairly, that we are victimized, that we are terrorized. And maybe, just maybe, we'll do something to change it.
Thank you, Marcia. And Marcia has been here since the very beginning, since George Floyd died. And again, you mentioned a lot of cheers, a lot of claps, but we saw a lot of tears. And, we've been talking to people, as that verdict was reached. And another thing that we've been hearing is that people in this community feel like there's a big weight lifted off of their shoulders. A lot of people feel like there is a lot of relief after that verdict. We even saw people, used to be a gas station, obviously, and at one point there was a sign, and I'll have Eric come a little bit closer so we can see where this sign that says "Justice for George Floyd." So before the verdict that said "Justice for George Floyd trial," okay? Now that says "Justice served." You see that at the bottom. And again, a lot of tears, a lot of excitement. At one point when that verdict was reached, we saw people drop to their knees, just crying and throwing their hands up. And again, the main sentiment here is that a lot of people in this community feel like there is a big, big sigh of relief. Back to you.
All right, Mitty Hicks, 38th in Chicago, an emotional release there for a lot of people. Thank you, Mitty.
All right, we want to go to Karen Scullin, who's in downtown Minneapolis, outside the Government Center with a crowd there. And Karen, you spoke with Maurice Hall, George Floyd's friend who was with him that day, that he lost his life. So tell me about the crowd that's around you right now.
Right. And I know a lot of people have been saying it is a very celebratory atmosphere. It is. It's kind of a happy chaos, I would describe it. But I'm with three people right here, right now, that I kind of want to speak to about what this actually means. Not just that everybody's happy, but really what it means. And